This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. We're coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. We're in Arthur J. Stansbury's Catechism of the Constitution of the United States. And Miss Francine, I'm going to go get a microphone. If we can't have everything we want, I can get a microphone and maybe make the audio a little more clear. I've got it here. Question 282 out of 333 questions, Arthur J. Stansbury, Catechism on our Constitution of the United States. A brief, that means it doesn't explain anything, it doesn't describe anything, it just throws it out there in brief form. In compact draft, as Supreme Court Justice Taft put it. So it bears understanding. Catechism, series of questions and answers. 282 says this, out of 333 questions. Did all the states of the United States agree to the federal Constitution at the time it went into operation? That's a significant question. To help you remember the dates are important. Constitutional Convention, 3 dates, and they're right in a row, and you can remember it easy this way. Our Constitutional Convention was in 1787. 1787. Constitution of the United States ratified by the requisite number of states, 1788, the next year. The militiamen of the United States called the people, it says right in the document, of course, we the people. Who is that? That's the militiamen of the several states of the United States, 13 of them at that time, but not all of them ratified it. We'll get to that. So drafted 1787, ratified in 1788, and put into operation 1789. 3 significant dates. Don't try to separate those in your mind, help you understand a little history. Well, not all of them agreed, but the rest of the states did follow. It was a slow process. It wasn't something that happened just all of a sudden with one fell swoop. As our common law tradition moves slowly and sure-footedly. That's why it's solid. Steps gingerly. The law of the city does not. The law of the city is by a single will. By decree, one fell swoop. Everybody conform or suffer the consequences. Kawam! That is not our common law tradition. Our common law tradition moves slowly, law case by law case, interpreting the law, building up a body of interpretation, and all of those cases building up over time develop a consistent thread, so we are solid in our understanding of the myriads of applications of a single law that never changes. True law never, ever changes, friends. But the applications of it to preserve the true law, to preserve its outcome, there must be many different applications to different sets of facts. True law, thou shalt not steal. That's one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not steal. That's number 8. That's number 8. In the true counting of the 10 commandments, not the Roman Church and Lutheran counting, which is false. They just take one out and add 2 at the end. They take out, thou shalt make unto me no graven images. Why? Because they worship graven images. Now they'll tell you they don't. Oh, I don't do that. Well, you don't understand what worship is. That's your problem. No, when you use a graven image, an icon on a 2-dimensional plane, that's what the Greek Orthodox Church majors in, or an image, a 3-dimensional idol, That's what the Church of Rome and the Lutheran Church majors in, and all the other visual aids to worship of icons that go with that in the West. When you do that, you're relegating worth. You're attributing worth, W-O-R-T-H, to these things, these created things, these deaf, dumb, blind things, wood, stone, canvas with paint on it. Even a living thing like a priest or a pope or a Muhammad, a man, and worship him and worship a place like Mecca. That's idolatry. The Islamic folks say, "Oh, we're not idolaters." No, yes, you are, and you do it 5 times a day. That's bowing down toward Mecca. We don't worship Mecca. Well, then why do you bow down to it? You're attributing something special to that place, a special power, a special something. Why would a person stop in front of an icon, an image, dead bones in a cathedral in Europe someplace and pray? That's a visual aid to worship. That is worship. That's attributing a special worth to some created thing, living or dead. Well, the Lutherans, and I stress the Lutherans, and I know Luther. I mean, I've read a lot about him. I don't know the man, but I mean to say that was a problem with Luther. Luther had a lot of fundamentals right, but that one he just couldn't pull himself away from idols, and he said so. He'd stop in front of a Madonna 3 times a day and pray because of the discipline that had been pounded into him as a monk. He said, I just can't get away from it. Well, there's every one of us got those kind of things in our life, and God's trying to weasel those things and beat those things out of us. He hates them. They that worship God, said Jesus Christ, must worship worthy. That's a contracted Anglo-Saxon word that means worthy ship. What do you attribute worthy of your time and money? Time and money, or one of the other or both. Attention and time and money. That's worship. Yeah, don't do that. Thou shalt not steal. You know, there's a lot of ways to steal in ways that look legal and even technically may be, but we want to apply that standard to every situation in a way that preserves that outcome standard. Stealing's against the law. There's nothing about our due process or common law in that commandment. It's not intended for that. It's intended to tell us what we don't want the result to be. Now, our courts have called it, I throw this out, it gets real complicated. They call it, our common law is due process, the way we go about doing things, but they call it substantive due process. Justice Scalia said, what is that? How can you have substance and due process the same thing? Well, you really can't. But what is meant by that? And our Supreme Court came up with that term, substantive due process. What does it mean? It means when you get all done going through enough due process to decide who's guilty and who isn't, who's wrong and who's right, double check, like we used to do in algebra, double check the result, double check the outcome. If the outcome produces something that's unjust, like it makes stealing legal, there's something wrong, go back and do it again. I've been in cases where stealing has been shown to be by the law legal. Weird stuff happens. Oh, yeah. The devil's clever. APAC. APAC. AIPAC. You know, I spent a lot of my time on the Bible and our common law tradition, and I don't spend as much time on the news. Matter of fact, people used to get upset because I wouldn't give the news on this channel. And I even say to people, I don't pay much attention to the news. I don't now. I found out it's all lies on both sides. And I'm not exaggerating, and I'm on one side, but I realize both sides are at war. And when that's what politics is. Lying is the name of the game. I'm not complaining about it. I just know it's the way you have to do it, or you won't have it. You won't be in office. You've got to deceive your enemy, and nobody can be trusted. Like Harry Truman said, you want a friend in politics, get yourself a dog. Yeah, I give that as testimony. I was hard in it full time for 5 years. And every ounce of my energy, everything about my life was poured into it. Every dime I had, I found out a little bit about what it was about and how dangerous it is and how it's filled with lies. It's a culture of lies. We're fighting a brutal battle and always have been and always will be. Nothing new about that. Just relax. Pace yourself, fight the battle, do what Jesus Christ says. But folks say, oh, he doesn't know anything about politics. I remember AIPAC. Oh boy, do I remember AIPAC. AIPAC. America, Israel, PAC. They came to me, offered me a whole lot of stuff. Oh, well, if you have anything, if you need anything when you get into office, you come to us. We've got information. We can just help you. We're not trying to control you. Well, that wasn't true, of course. They want to control. And we'll take you to Israel and show you around, all expense trip paid. We'll do television ads for you. Just fill out our form. Just fill out our form. All the political action committees want you to fill out their form, and I've done that for a lot. They want to know where you stand. The small business administrator or small business PAC wants you to do that. I remember Tom DeLay had a political action committee. I did it there, and the APAC wanted me to do it. And they invited me to their big banquets to raise money for people like me running for office. I did all that. Went to Washington, D.C., met with them. But I wasn't whole hog. I wasn't a whole hog. I wasn't against them. Wasn't again the state of Israel. But like I said a while ago, James, the first verse, defines the question that needs to be asked about that. Of course, the problem with APAC is they don't register as a foreign lobby, like the law says. Jack Kennedy said they had to do that. They never did. Next thing you know, he's dead. There's just facts. I don't. Is there a relationship between those two? Oh, probably a lot of things about Jack Kennedy, though. He was again pretty near everybody, good or bad. He didn't make. Trouble with Jack Kennedy was he was too young to understand how to keep alive in politics. You think I'm kidding? No, I think that's what it was. It's dangerous. DJ Trump just barely dodged a bullet once and about got another one. I think he's acclimated now. Acclimated. You have to be acclimated to it. You're on the world stage. The stakes are as large as they can possibly be down here on land. Very dangerous. Well, James says to the 12 tribes scattered abroad, who is Israel? To be more to the point, what is Israel biblically? Well, here's what I want to do. I want to cover a couple of these questions. Miss Francine, will you do me a favor? She's looking for her button to open her mic. That's what I think. Yes, see? Will you do me a favor and remind me to go back after I finish a few questions in the Catechism, to go back and discuss the 12 tribes scattered abroad a little bit. That's in the news. I want to talk about it. Well, can you help me? Right, jot it down because I know you can be like me. I can get you going my way and then we'll both forget. I don't have a pencil handy. Well, here's the question. Did they all agree? No, then they all did agree. The Constitution, they ratified it. Was it then expected, 283, was it then expected that other states would be formed to join the Union? Answer, yes. And provision, our Constitution makes provision for admitting new states into the Union. And after that 13, we have since that time admitted another 37 states, a total of 50. But our Constitution of the United States sets out the standard that allows admission of a state. It also sets out the standard that allows a state to be split into two states. That's happened once in the history of our country. One state in the history of our country has been split into two, and it had to happen, and we like to think it did, according to our Constitution's requirement. In other words, Congress has to give permission to split a state or part of a state to split off and go to another state. If a part of a state wants to do that, Congress has to give permission. If Congress doesn't give permission, our Constitution of the United States says we all agree that can't happen. State legislative districts of Illinois have petitioned the state government in Illinois to join Indiana, especially in the southern part of the state next to Indiana along the Wabash River. The state legislators have made that petition. Same things happened in the state of Oregon. The western or eastern part of the state of Oregon have petitioned the state of Oregon, the legislators there petitioned to be cut off and join the state of Idaho. Ever since World War II, Northern California had been fed up with downstate California, and they said, we want to split off and form our own state. We don't want to join another state. And we'll call our state the state of Jefferson. That's what they called it. And they still, you go to their website, www.stateofjefferson or something like that, and you can read all about them. They're still trying to do it. They've been trying to do it since World War II or somewhere thereabouts, after World War II. When you drive north, Interstate 5, and you're coming up to Shasta Lake, you come out of the San Joaquin Valley, and then you come up to Shasta Lake, and then you head on up into the mountains toward that big volcano called Mount Shasta. And Interstate 5 swings right over the edge of that cinder cone right there beside Mount Shasta. Right when you get up, coming up over the hill, there'll be a big sign there out in an intermontane meadow, a dale, a beautiful dale, an intermountain dale. And it says, welcome to the state of Jefferson. Used to, a year or two, I saw it there, a year or two ago. Welcome to the state of Jefferson. But you can't do that according to our Constitution of the United States without Congress's permission. See what else he says here. Oh, by the way, the one state that has split off and split into two parts is the state of Virginia. The state of Virginia has split into two parts, Virginia and West Virginia. The counties called the state of West Virginia did not want to go with the Confederacy and voted not to do it and petitioned Congress to split off, and they did. There are many counties in the South that voted to not leave the Union, but they didn't have enough clout together. They weren't contiguous in those places, so that didn't happen. For example, a county there in northern Mississippi, the county where the president of the Confederacy lived, voted to not leave the Union. That's just one example. There are powerful forces that were controlling the South that took them into hell. I'm not saying they weren't right about what they said, but here's where they were wrong, and it was a controlling question. And Jesus Christ makes this point. If you're going to go to war, a king that goes to war first stops and takes inventory of his resources and calculates whether or not he can win. And if he calculates he's going to lose, it'd be darn stupid, just dumb to go to war. The South were blinded to that. There was no way they could win. They were defeated before they stopped. That's why a lot of people said this ain't going to work. That's why Senator Sam Houston, governor of Texas, forfeited his political life as U.S. Senator from Texas and then became governor to try to stop the madness. He couldn't prevail over the hotheads that were caught up with the rich people and the influential groups, namely the Church of Rome and the Jewish contingent from Britain that were there controlling things. France and Spain were both cocked and loaded and poised to invade Mexico and invade the South. As soon as if the South would have won, they would have taken over the South. South didn't have any power, not like those countries. My. Don't get caught up in rah, rah, rah. It never comes out good. The South lost their country, lost their culture, and there was a lot to preserve there that was good, but they lost it because they were stupid enough to pull a gun on somebody that had the drop on them. I train my boys, don't ever pull a gun on somebody that's got the drop on you. You'll get killed. When the police show up with German Shepherd dogs, 9mm pistols, don't pull your gun and start shooting. That's stupid. You'll die. Same thing goes with countries. The 12 tribes scattered abroad. 9 million people live in the state of Israel. 9 million. How many people live in America? Oh, we're going to do that afterwards, aren't we? Let's get back to this. Don't let me forget, Miss Francine, after I get this done. By whom are new states to be admitted to the Union? Now remember, this was written in 1828. At that time, there were a lot of states left to be admitted to the Union. So when he's writing this, that was more real than it is now. But if the Democrats get control, they're going to try to get Puerto Rico in the Union. It's a territory. Guam is a territory of the United States that Congress could admit into the Union if they wanted to, if they met the requirements. What are the requirements? Must have a population of 60,000. For a territory to be admitted into the Union as a state, that territory must prove that they have at least 60,000 people in the territory. I don't know if Guam has 60,000. I've never looked. You could look it up. Puerto Rico, I'm sure they do. I'd look that up too. 60,000. When Nevada was admitted to the Union during that horrible war between the northern and the southern tiers of the states, it did not have 60,000 people in it. No, sir. They fudged the numbers something fierce. Why? They wanted to get that state in the Union because the silver, primarily the silver that was coming out of that state by the trainload to help pay for the war. And the Congress wanted that state to be firmly in the Union so they could have full legal cover to defend it from invasion. And they did. They sent the troops out to Nevada, Arizona. They had American troops in the Southwest. And Texas was raising troops to invade that area. That's true. And they sent the boys out there to stop them. And they did. But there weren't 60,000 troops. That was wartime. They fudged the numbers. At that time, there were several thousand people living in Virginia City, which was just up the hill from Reno to the south and east, up where the silver mines were, the Comstock lode, right off the Truckee Flats there where Reno was. Thousands of people there, but there wasn't anybody really anywhere else. It's just scattered all over that God-forsaken rattlesnake pit called Nevada. Yeah, God-forsaken rattlesnake pit like Arizona, or God-forsaken rattlesnake pit. It was like Arizona. They didn't have anything to farm there, didn't have any water. What did they have? Gold and silver and copper. Lots of it. Still do, by the way. Still do. We haven't even begun to recover the recoverable gold and silver and copper from our arid, mineralized states. But they fudged the numbers to 60,000, and a lot of people were scattered all over, but in those days, how could you even find them? Thousands, a few thousand. But they let Nevada in on what I'd consider to be false evidence. But at wartime, they thought, well, we got to get it in. We're going to try to find people. We're going to send people out there. We're going to, whatever they had to do, who knows what kind of shenanigans happened. I remember reading about Parliament coming up with this idea called the Habeas Corpus Act back in the 1600s. Part of our common law tradition. It's how, if a man's in jail, he can file a petition to the court and ask them to order the jailer to bring his body before the court and prove that the jailing is lawful. That's part of our Constitution of the United States. It's called the greatest of all written commands, called a writ. A writ. The great writ, we call it in our common law tradition. It's preserved. It shall never be suspended. Well, they can be suspended, but there are times, unless it says in times of war, and who has the power to do it, but it's to be there all the time. Habeas corpus, it's part of our common law tradition. It was a brainchild of the Parliament of England, but when they wanted to pass it, it gave a handle, a way to make sure that people were jailed in a lawful way. They didn't have that before. They were trying to keep that's part of our common law tradition, not to jail men because of the covenant of God, the trust settlement of God to enter new lands. If men are jailed unlawfully, they can't enter new lands. That mitigates against what God wants, according to the Bible, you see. That's why it's so important. It's called false imprisonment. In non-criminal cases, you can file an action against false imprisonment, and it's called habeas corpus in criminal cases and other cases. Well, when they were counting, they didn't have enough votes in Parliament to pass the Habeas Corpus Act. So there were a couple of drunk parliamentarians whose job it was, they used to drink a lot in those days, even maybe more so than today. They were drunk. Drunker and Cooter Brown? No, not quite, but they were pretty tipsy. Standing at the doors of Parliament, and when they took votes, instead of saying yay or nay when it was an important vote, and they were raising the hand so there wouldn't be any miscounting, what they did was they sent everybody outside of the parliamentary chambers. They had two big doors there, and they assigned two parliament members to stand at the doors, and all the ones that would vote yes would walk back in, and they would count the bodies. I mean, very down to the ground about how they did this. They didn't trust listening to noises, yays and nays, and some counts or raising hands. They said, no, that's too important. We're going to count the bodies. So these two tipsy parliamentarians, two, not one, two. So you have two witnesses. They sent everybody out of the room, and the ones that supported and voted for the Habeas Corpus Act would walk back in. So these two boys standing there, not three sheets to the wind, but about two. They were tipsy and laughing, having fun, and somebody'd walk in, and they'd say, "That's one." True story. Oh, I believe it to be true. I read it, an account of it. Another fellow said, he walked in, "Oh, that's two." Then this great big portly feller walked in. He walked in, and one of them said, "That's two right there." He said, "What do you mean?" "Well, shucks, he weighs as much as two men. We'll count him as two." They did that with everybody that was portly. Portly. That means fat. That's the way habeas corpus was passed. That's politics, friends. That's the way it worked. I'm not justifying it. I'm saying that's God could stop a lot of this if he wanted to. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. People say, "Oh, the Constitution of the United States, that wasn't lawful the way they passed it." Hey, we got it, friends, and it's working great. Whether you say, I don't think it was passed unlawfully, but people say that. 283. Congress has power to say who's admitted. 285. Is the number of states that may be admitted limited? No, we can admit as many as we want, as long as we got the land, or divide states up into littler parts. 286. Question. What is the population requirement to admit a state to the Union? It says this. Congress has determined that a district or territory containing 60,000 inhabitants may be received into the Union as a state. Congress has determined. Now, here's what I want you to do. We're going to quit there for a minute, I think. I want you to go to the internet, some of you, and tell me this. Find the answer to this question and tell me and put it in the chat. Is the 60,000 population requirement for a territory to become a state, is that in the Constitution, or is that what Congress has passed in legislation as an interpretation of the Constitution? Type the question in your computer, and please put your answer in the just yes, it is part of the Constitution, or no, it isn't. Let's make that distinction. And I may have said it wrong. Go look. But it is 60,000. I know that. But is it because the Constitution says it's 60,000, or that's Congress's interpretation of what the Constitution means? Well, you look it up. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dog keep the racket all night long.